Have you ever stopped to think that maybe money is influencing your life in ways you don't even realize? Not just in what you buy, but in who you choose to love, who you trust, or even in the way you see yourself in the mirror. Sometimes it's not the feeling that changes, it's the bank balance. We live in a society where financial capital isn't just a tool for exchange. It seeps into our most intimate bonds, our gestures of affection, our oldest friendships, and even the way we feel worthy, or not, of receiving love. And the scariest part is that all of this happens in silence. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the invisible impact of money on human relationships, a kind of capital that's much harder to measure, emotional capital. At first glance, money seems to be just a practical tool, something we use to buy food, pay bills, or pursue our dreams. But when we look more closely, we realize that it also acts as a silent filter in our human connections. It shapes conversations, determines who feels comfortable in certain spaces, and even dictates who gets heard and who gets ignored. It's not just about having or not having money. It's about how money, or the lack of it, changes the way people treat us and how we treat others. In a group of friends, for example, it only takes one person starting to earn more for the balance to slowly shift. The invitations start to change, the plans too. What was once a simple, uncomplicated friendship now carries a silent weight of comparison, discomfort, or even envy. And no one talks about it, because when money enters the picture, it often brings shame, pride, or fear, feelings that push people apart, divide, and silence. In love, the presence or absence of money shows up like a ghost hovering over decisions. Couples argue about expenses, dreams, priorities. And often, what's at stake isn't money itself, but what it represents: security, power, freedom, or control. Financial dependence can disguise itself as care, and the provider can slowly become the controller. Behind many silent breakups lies an invisible imbalance. Someone who gave more than they could, and someone who received without realizing the emotional cost. And when we look at our self-image, the impact is even more intimate. The way we feel about ourselves is often deeply tied to our financial status. If we have money, we feel we deserve respect. If we don't, we doubt our worth. It's not a universal rule, but it's a pattern that repeats with disturbing frequency. Without us noticing, money becomes a mirror that distorts who we are and convinces us that we are worth less when we have less. This influence is subtle precisely because it's cultural. From a young age, we're taught to associate success with accumulation and failure with scarcity. And we grow up believing that successful people deserve more admiration, more space, more love. This creates a silent emotional hierarchy where those with more money unconsciously believe they deserve more affection, and those with less get used to apologizing for existing. The big trap is that almost no one recognizes this process while it's happening. It's easy to see economic inequality in numbers, but much harder to notice its impact on our emotions, our relationships, and even our identity. And because we don't see it, we don't question it. Because we don't question it, we repeat it. Money continues to operate in the background of our relationships, like an invisible screenwriter rewriting the story without asking permission. That's why we need to talk about emotional capital. Because even when we believe we're living purely human relationships, there's a hidden layer of economic influence shaping gestures, words, and silences. And if we don't bring this to light, we'll stay trapped in an invisible web that turns affection into transaction without us even realizing it. Money, in its essence, has no intrinsic value. It's a symbol, a piece of paper, a number on a screen, a collective agreement that it represents something. But what exactly does it represent? For some, security. For others, freedom. In many cultures, it's synonymous with dignity. And that's where the issue runs deeper. When the symbolic value of money becomes entangled with the value we assign to ourselves and to others, it stops being just a tool and starts acting as a silent judge of our worth in the world. Philosophy teaches us that what we value defines who we are. And in a society where money sits at the top of the value scale, it's only natural that it seeps into every other dimension of life. Affection, for example, which should be free and spontaneous, becomes regulated by unspoken codes of power and possession. We begin to measure love not by presence, but by the ability to provide, to sustain, to impress. Money becomes an emotional language. Those who have more speak louder, even without saying a word. Nietzsche wrote that all value is a human creation. This means that if money has become a thermometer for affection, it's because, at some point, we allowed it to be. But there's a trap in this. Unlike love, money is finite, measurable, accumulable. And when we place our self-esteem or our emotional bonds under the logic of scarcity and comparison, we stop seeing the other as an end and start seeing them as a means. The deeper question may not be, how much do you have? But rather, how much of what you feel has been shaped by what you have? When love becomes a debt, when friendship becomes status, when self-respect depends on a bank account, we're not just facing an economic crisis, we're facing a crisis of meaning. And understanding this is the first step toward freeing our affection from the logic of the market and returning to our relationships what should never have been up for negotiation: our humanity. Have you ever felt uncomfortable splitting the bill with friends who earn more than you? Have you ever avoided going on a date because you knew you couldn't afford it? Have you ever noticed how sometimes the ones with more money are the ones who choose the plans, the places, the times? As if the power to decide came with the credit card. These seemingly harmless gestures reveal a silent dynamic. Money determines who gets to propose, who has to concede, and who often feels the need to justify their presence. In the family environment, choices are also shaped by this invisible capital. Siblings who compete not just for affection, but for inheritance. Parents who give more attention to the child who made it, as if financial success were proof of character. Even the silence of those who don't want to worry others with their debts is a form of hiding pain out of shame, as if being in difficulty were a moral failure rather than a reflection of larger structures. Money infiltrates even the unspoken words, the over-the-top gifts on special occasions, the guilt of those who can't give what they believe others expect. And in the workplace, emotional capital shows up even more strongly. People pretending to be more confident than they really are, just so they won't appear weak. Colleagues competing to look more successful, even at the cost of their own health. The performance of success is often just a disguise for insecurity. And behind all of it, we see a pattern repeating itself: money, or the lack of it, shaping behaviors, silencing vulnerabilities, distorting bonds that should be built on truth and reciprocity. Money, as concrete as it may seem, operates invisibly within our relationships. It doesn't shout, but it whispers decisions. It doesn't impose, but it steers affections. In the silence of everyday choices, it becomes a hidden mediator between what we feel and what we express, between what we desire and what we allow ourselves to experience. And the more we deny its emotional influence, the more bound we become to it. Nameless, shapeless, with no chance of transformation. To recognize emotional capital is to name what we feel. It's to shine a light into the dark corners where money makes the rules without us even noticing. It's to understand that, yes, affection can be shaped by symbolic debts, by silent expectations, and by hierarchies that shouldn't exist. But it's also to believe that we can choose a different path, one where a person's value isn't tied to their income, but to their presence, their listening, their truth. Where love doesn't have to be paid for, friendship doesn't have to be proven, and respect isn't for sale. If this video made you reflect on something you've lived, or are living, I invite you to keep walking this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this with someone you love. Because talking about money is, above all, talking about humanity. And when we shine a light on this topic, we make space for freer, more conscious, and above all, more genuine relationships. Now tell me, how much is money shaping your relationships without you even noticing?